It is another Mailbag Monday on the Locked On Thunder podcast. On today's show, we're going to discuss what are the best free agents for OKC, who all is trying for the playoffs in the West, who's the GOAT, and would you trade the first overall pick this year for Giannis? We'll talk all about that coming up.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member and editor-in-chief over at thunderousintentions.com, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by our good friends over at PrizePicks, we're going to dive into your mailbag questions for another Mailbag Monday episode. Everything ranging from who is vying for the playoffs out west next year, and who are some big-time free agents and trade targets OKC could go after that might make some sense, and should the Thunder, if they get lucky, trade the first overall pick, as well as a good question about the GOATs of a lot of different categories in basketball. Very excited about this week on Locked On Thunder. Jam-packed week. Today we're going to do a mailbag episode. Tomorrow it's back to our NBA draft profile and projections with Cam Whitmore, one of my draft crushes in this draft. Wednesday, we're going to say what up Beck and bring in Howard Beck to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder. Thursday, we're going to talk with Richard Stamen at Mavs Draft on Twitter about the NBA draft. And Friday in the week, with our Taylor Hendricks draft profile and projection. Next week, we'll, of course, be back on a Mailbag Monday, so make sure you drop your questions below on YouTube or on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Now, let's dive into your mailbag questions. That's what you can expect moving forward for you everydayers who listen to this podcast every single day, even in the off-season. Subscribe for free across all podcasting platforms so you never miss an episode. First question from my good pal, Steve McGahee, at Steve McGahee on Twitter, and of course, you see him on News 9, one of the biggest celebrities that we have in Oklahoma City, Steve McGahee. Legit question, how many teams in the Western Conference will feel like they have a shot at making the playoffs next season? With a new coach in Houston, the Spurs could land Victor Wembanyama, and the West could be stacked moving forward. Look, this is absolutely true, because Victor could, let's just look at it from this standpoint, right? The Rockets are going to already be talking themselves into, the possibility of them having a Thunder-like turnaround because they have a coach that brought the Celtics to the finals. They have some young talent on that roster that we've been saying, even outside of their fan base. I've been saying, Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, like these guys are good players, Şengün, good players, but they just have no direction and no leadership in Houston to put the pieces together. And so they're going to be talking to themselves, no matter what happens in a few days for the NBA draft lottery, they're going to be talking themselves into this group and making a significant jump in win total to make the NBA play-in. The Spurs, getting Victor, and you have Pop, and you have a few pieces there, that changes your buzz around the team. You wouldn't expect to make the playoffs if you're either team, but like the buzz around the team would be there, and the key word here is trying. Obviously, all 15 teams can't make the postseason, but trying to do so. Those are two teams that I don't think will roll over again next year, especially if San Antonio gets lottery luck. Then you have Portland, who this is where we start to say, let's wait and see, because right now it all looks really good. It all looks like the West will be incredibly fierce next year. But what if we get to July 1 and Portland decides to trade Dame? Then Portland is completely wiped off the map. Utah, what is Utah going to do next year? Now, they put together an impressive season where they fell short of the play-in tournament and decided to punt at the very end. But next year, their pick is top 10 protected. Of course, it'd be owed OKC if it doesn't go that way, if they win more than that and finish 11 or 12th. So do they now focus on the draft moving forward, in Utah, where you're focusing on lottery position and some young players? Maybe, maybe not. They could be another team vying for it. Dallas is obviously desperate for a bounce back, where you're gonna see them try to gear up with Luka and try to bring back Kyrie and move forward with that crew. We know what the Thunder are all about. The Thunder are going to try to make the postseason next year. The Pelicans are going to try to make the postseason next year, and they're going to talk themselves into, hey, we get Zion healthy for once, and who knows what can happen. The Timberwolves are too deep in, to purposely slide out. Lakers, they're going to have LeBron and AD. The Clippers have committed to keeping their group. The Warriors just seem inevitable at this point. Then you have the Suns and the Kings and the Grizzlies and the Nuggets. Like all those teams have the trajectory of a team that are going to be trying for the playoffs next year. So it's important, to remember that Steve understands that all these teams can't make the playoffs. You can only get 10 in there, but they're going to be trying. It's going to be games where you're not playing, some downtrodden team until the last 10 games of the season. Maybe a team packs it in, but from the word go, what team is packing it in? What team is purposely fielding their less than best lineup each night in the West next year? And on paper right now, it seems like there's going to be none that are that way, where they're at least going to try and compete next season, which is going to be very fun. Except let's wait and see on Portland. Let's wait and see on Portland and see how this unfolds. That's a really good question, and it really highlights, next year, everything's on the table. On the table is a massive leap from Oklahoma City, where they leap into the assured playoff spots, and maybe they go from 40 to 45 to 50 wins. On the table also is some regression from Oklahoma City, because progression is not linear, and there's going to be a humongous fight for 10 spots. And next year, there's going to be a lot of teams disappointed. This year, Houston didn't try, San Antonio didn't try, Portland pulled the plug. It gave a haphazard effort. Utah was a surprising darling. They don't care that they didn't make it. And then Dallas just punted the last couple of games, but of course it's a massive disappointment considering what they tried to do and go get Kyrie. But next year, every team who misses it will be fairly disappointed. Except for Houston and San Antonio, who will at least, they're going to try. They won't. It's not like their season is going to be a failure if they don't make it next year, but they will try, and they'll do better than they did this year. And those wins got to come from somebody. So it's going to be fun to see who outlasts in the West and who fights through it in the West. Because there's always a surprise team. This year it was Oklahoma City, and to an extent Utah. There's always, and even Utah, they're a surprise team. And like we just said, the wins got to come from somewhere. They collected 37 wins. And in the Western Conference, they collected 24 wins. Those are 24 wins that we thought were going to be gettable at the start of the year. Whenever they packed it in and looked like they're going to be tanking this year. Oklahoma City got 25 wins out West this year. And they were pegged to win 20 games total for their season win total from John Hollinger and the Athletic and everyone else. So the wins got to come from somewhere. And as you see the Rockets improve in the West, they only had 12 wins out West. San Antonio only had 10 wins out West. And they each finished with 22 total wins. If they improve a smidgen, which we think that they will, it's going to be fascinating to see kind of how this all unfolds. Now let's dive into this question from @KiwiGreg5555. Would you consider offering a bag to Draymond Green for a 2-year contract? No. I don't think that the Thunder should make a move like this. I get the appeal to it because he can bring you that veteran presence in a position where schematically he fits what you're trying to do. Like he would fit Mark's plan very well, but I don't think that Draymond's going to want to come off the bench, number one. And it's more valuable to start SGA, Giddey, J-Dub, and Chet. And then you'd at that point either have to knock out Dort from the starting five or put Draymond on the bench. And it just, that creates a weird aspect to this as well. And I don't think that the Thunder are in that spot right now. And that's okay. I get that they have a lot of draft assets. I get that they have top 10 in the league cap space, but to go and get Draymond, I don't think benefits them, because we're seeing that like your core players have to go through the postseason and have to take their lumps and take their hits. And I don't think that Draymond brings you enough to get you through that. So I just don't think that Draymond would be a good route. And it also comes down to just pure roster spots, which we're going to talk about as we move forward here, talking about the roster construction and possible free agency targets. But I just don't think that Draymond is a great fit in practice. You know, again, 2K, a little up in my league, my NBA eras, whatever it's called nowadays. Throw Draymond on this team, it's awesome. But like in practice, it's a lot. There's a lot more variables to it whenever you actually do it in the actual league. Let's talk now about our good friends over at PrizePicks. Folks, PrizePicks is incredible. Go to PrizePicks.com right now or download the app PrizePicks, because what it allows you to do is enjoy games, because what you can do is pick 2 to 6 players. Let's say that you want to pick Kevin Durant and Jamal Murray. What you do is you look at their line and say Kevin Durant's line is 26.5 and Jamal Murray is 21.5. You'd say, will they score more or less than that? And if they do, you can win 25 times your money on any entry if you predict right. It's just you versus the PrizePicks projections, so there's no competing against other players. It's just you versus the numbers. And you can do this on NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men and women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Eurobasket, cricket, and more. So check it out today, because entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy, safe, and offers fast withdrawals. Currently operational in 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app with PrizePicks.com and sign up today to stay with the daily PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com, PrizePicks app. You can receive a 100% deposit bonus up to $100 with the code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks gives you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks gives you $50. Do not forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON to sign up today for that instant deposit match up to $100. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. At Bravement Life, especially with the rumors of Harden returning to Houston just signing their new head coach, Ime Udoka, and wanting to win soon. What do you think that Houston would trade back to get their pick next year, or get their picks back next year and in the future, if Sam Presti could hold that over their heads for leverage? I'm not sure that it would be anything of significance. Like, for example, I don't think that they would trade this year's pick in this draft class for their future picks, because when you look at their future picks and what they're owed to Oklahoma City, while it is great that the Thunder do have all of these future draft assets, next year's Rockets pick is top 5 protected. So, I mean, top 4 protected. So if it's in the top 4, Houston gets it anyway. And it's a bad draft class. So if the Rockets are good enough to where it's not a top 4 pick, they don't really care in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, picks matter. The players that you get there matter. They'll find value at any position. And by this time next year, we might be saying something completely different about this draft class. But on the surface, this draft class is not great in 2024. Next draft, not great. You're going to get Harden if Harden wants to return without trading anything. So it's not like you need a cupboard to trade for Harden. And any other person you want to go get, like let's say that Jaylen Brown is a name that the Rockets have been talking about. You want to go get Jaylen Brown, that's great. The Celtics aren't going to take future draft picks for Jaylen Brown. They're trying to win. They're going to take one of your young players or 2 of your young players or whatever it takes from Houston. Plus, they have the draft picks that they acquired when trading Harden. So like they've kind of replenished this a little bit, especially for as bad as the draft classes are coming up in 2024. So like at that point, yes, it's leverage because you can just unprotect this pick and give them an asset to go trade for not even just a star, but like a rotational piece and filling out your depth and maybe even a solid starter to kind of put you over the edge in those trades. But ultimately, you're not going to swap picks for your picks because you would then gain nothing. And your young players, you only have a few that are even worth anything that you wouldn't want to include. Like, you wouldn't want to include Jabari, you wouldn't want to include Şengün, you wouldn't want to include Jalen Green, just for the right to have your pick back when it's already such a prized protection, where if you did land one of the best players, you'd get it anyway. It's not like the Clippers where it's unprotected, and if they somehow flamed out, went to the lottery, and then won the lottery, it'd go to the Thunder. Like, the difference is Houston controls their pick if it's a top 4 pick. So I just wouldn't I wouldn't think that they would be too desperate to do that. 2026 pick, again, we fall into the same scenario of like, what are they going to trade? What are they going to give up to get that pick? What is the leverage there in that way? So I just think that ultimately the Rockets are fine with handing out these picks to OKC if it gets that way, if it goes that way. At fan of Ozzy Bass 1, if OKC is looking to beef up their bench with a physical presence who makes sense and sets screens, grab rebounds, uses verticality, and shoots the ball and shoots the three, would they maybe take a look at Aaron Baines now that he's had a full year off in New Zealand in the NBL to prove himself he's recovered from his Tokyo Olympics injury? Aaron Baines is fine. I'd have to look into like, you know, how well he's played and everything. I wouldn't think that this one would make sense either, just because you'd be taking a flyer on someone who, you know, hasn't played in the NBA recently and was an average player in the NBA period. And so I don't think it makes sense to bring him in, especially whenever you consider the roster spots, the roster spots that are not available to Oklahoma City because of how many players that they have under contract that you want to keep around. So like at that point, right, Sarge is the only one leaving. Sarge is the only impending free agent. Everyone else you can get back under team control. Now you have some decisions to make, like the Lindy Waters club option. You can decline that. The Jeremiah Robinson-Earl contract is partly guaranteed. Like, you have ways and mechanisms to clear out more roster spots, but you have 3 draft picks this year, one of them in the first round, so you're going to for sure take that first round pick under a standard deal, which he slides into Sarge's spot. And then you would then have 2 high second round picks, which likely will not take two-way contracts because they're such a high second round pick. They'll want standard deals too. So then you're going to need to move and shake for those players as well. Would you want to continue to do that dance for other spots? So at that point, it'd come down to, would you rather have Bane or JRE? Would you rather have Bane or Lindy Waters? Would you rather have Bane or, X player? Like, for example, the other guys on non-guaranteed deals are Wiggins, Joe, non-guaranteed deals. Those 2 guys you'd rather have over any free agent that is of that caliber, that is of that like Bane caliber and lower, and even a little bit higher. Like, those guys have cleared those cheap options. So it just wouldn't make a ton of sense to go bring in somebody on a roster spot. From John Serena, enjoy your podcast from Australia. I think OKC needs a cheap backup center. What do you think? If roster spots weren't like at a premium for OKC, a good backup center would make sense. Especially a cheap veteran center who can just come in and brings size and can rebound. But I think ultimately you're waiting to see how this team plays with Chet Holmgren before you make anything dramatic. But I think that you bring in a player, just to throw a random name out there, right? Like B-Ball Paul. Bring in Paul Reed makes sense. He's young. He's from Philadelphia. He struck with gold once from Philadelphia. He wouldn't cost you an arm and a leg, but we'll see if that changes. If he continues to play this well in the postseason, we'll see if that changes. And he is a restricted free agent with the qualifying offer, so like the Sixers can match it. So like, what I'm saying is, again, just throwing out a name, using a guy like Paul Reed, who wouldn't demand starter minutes, who if you did need to bench him because he just wasn't producing, doesn't really matter, doesn't really hurt you at all in the pocketbook. Like, that would be the caliber of player that you're looking for and that you're looking at in this case. So I think that sure, it's worth looking at, but it's hard to come up with that name because, again, you're going to have to pick that person over a player already on the Thunder roster. And it sounds easy on the surface right this second, but as you start to fill this roster out with those draft picks, it gets harder. And we'll see what they do in the draft. Like, they might only take a player at 12 and then trade those 2 second-round picks. They might combine those 2 second-round picks and move up in the second round. They might trade out of the second round and keep the first-round pick. They might trade out of the draft all entirely together. Who knows? Like, we have to see how it all unfolds. But as of this second, it is hard to see, there being a roster spot for OKC to go after a player in free agency, even though they have all this cap space. Now, the next question from Ben Glover. If OKC got the number 1 overall pick, would you trade it for Giannis? This is a tough one Because we know what Giannis is. Like, Giannis is an elite player who's one of the best players we've seen in the game, who impacts the game, who dominates the game, and just does everything possible on the floor. However, Victor is not only this transcendent generational talent, yada, yada, yada. Victor's also under control for 9 seasons. Giannis has a player option for the 2025-26 season. History tells us players do not stay here. History tells us players do not stay in Oklahoma City. It's not a flashy market. It's just the reality. So would you rather have 9 years of the possibility that Victor Wembanyama becomes even close to the player that Giannis is, or 2 seasons of Giannis? 2 seasons in which you're not truly ready experience-wise to win a title, but Giannis brings you that title pedigree and also brings you immediately one of the best 5 players in the sport. It's a tough call. It's a close call. But I think that you in this market size, history tells us that a guy won't stay in, so you just take the gamble on having 9 years of control of somebody. And I say 9 years because we've never seen a player turn down that second contract from their team. So they sign the first deal 4 years and then sign the next deal. And bada bing, bada boom, you've got 9 years of control over somebody of the possibility of Victor's caliber. So that's why I lean with the first overall pick. Now, if you're Portland and you somehow get lucky and win the lottery, would you push all in to get Giannis? You know, not to say that this is even on the table, not to say that Giannis is even going to demand a trade. I don't think that he will. But hypothetically speaking, just if I put that offer in front of you, what would you do with it? If you're Portland, would you rather have 9 years of Victor, or trade him straight up for Giannis and whatever you need to do to match salaries, if that's even possible, after the dive into the trade machine? But let's just say it is possible. You know, let's just act like it is for this purpose, the philosophy of it. What would you do? Would you trade Victor and 9 years away for Giannis 2 years, but you do have Dame, who you can add Giannis to, and you get to keep around a generational icon for your franchise rather than kind of starting over? It'd be a wild sequence of events if that happens, to kind of discuss the value of 9 years of Victor versus 2 years of Giannis. But again, I don't think that Giannis is going to demand a trade. I don't think that Giannis is going to leave Milwaukee this offseason. But it is fun to think about. It is fun to talk about. Coming up, let's talk about who the GOATs are. Great question. As well as, does Bobby Portis fit the OKC Thunder? What does a Poku extension look like? And what does the draft look like for OKC? We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For you everydayers, a fun week is ahead in Oklahoma City, folks. Listen, I'm here to tell you, it is going to be fun to see Howard Beck on the pod on Wednesday, Richard Stamen on the pod on Thursday, and plus our draft profile and projections. This question from @Alex_Bowlerjack. NBA greats in your opinion? This is such a fun question. NBA greats for the greatest scorer, passer, rebounder, physical, dominant, altered other players' games, and most underrated of all time. This is so fun. And I want you to take this not in a toxic way, but I truly want to know. Don't fight about it. Don't debate about it. Don't name call about it in the comment section, but in the comment section down below. I want you to fill this out, but only fill it out with players who you actually saw in your lifetime. And that's how I'm going to answer the question. I know Wilt was incredible, MJ's incredible, yada, yada, yada. But who in your cognitive lifetime did you watch play that fills out these categories for you? That's how I'm going to answer it. I think that's the most fun way to answer it. And then if you're, most of you, some of you are older than me, fill it out. Let me know who in your lifetime you would say surpassed these different categories of NBA greats. So the best scorer I've ever seen is going to be Kevin Durant. The way that he can score the ball, insane. I mean, LeBron obviously is the NBA's all-time scoring leader, so it probably should be LeBron. But like just pure scoring the basketball, Kevin, Steph, LeBron, like all come to mind for me. But I just can't shake that KD being my initial reaction. Best passer of all time. When this first was put onto Twitter and I was thinking about it, my instant reaction said Steve Nash. But I mean, again, pure passer, not looking at their overall game, not looking at their anything else. Josh Giddey's up there of like the best player I've physically ever seen pass a basketball is Josh Giddey. But He obviously doesn't have that cliche, that cachet of a veteran or like an all-time great. But again, pure passer, only a passer, not looking at any other aspect of their game. Josh Giddey is the best passer I've seen. Rebounder. This is a good one. Rebounder is one that I think gets underrated or like not thought about a lot. Andre Drummond is probably the best rebounder that I've seen like in my lifetime in terms of like only does rebounding and that's kind of it. Tim Duncan, great rebounder. Kevin Garnett, a great rebounder. Dwight, but like Drummond was pretty much just all rebounds. But I'm gonna go with like a better name than Drummond. But let me know again in the comment section down below. Most physical and most dominant. Most dominant, I'm gonna say Shaq. Most physical, I'm gonna say Giannis. That way, get to play with both of them in there. Altered other players' games. This is interesting. Of like, do you mean a defender or like you can read this in a multitude of ways. As a defender who altered the other player, or Steph, like altered the game and made people like altered Trey's game, for example, like Trae Young shooting all these wild shots from beyond the arc. You know, when we see those highlights from in high school and college and in the NBA, like Steph altered the game of other players. I'm going to assume that you mean like defender, to where it's like best defender of all time and best defender in the NBA in my time that I've seen. Kawhi, like Kawhi, you can't shake the movie. I was gonna call it a movie. The video of LeBron looking back, seeing Kawhi's about to check in, and then just saying the F word. Like you cannot like deny how he altered LeBron in that series. So did JJ Barea, by the way, in the 2011 finals. No big deal. Underrated of all time. This is my answer wholeheartedly. Jerry Stackhouse. Like Jerry Stackhouse was him back in the day. I think that we kind of not use him as a punching bag, but like, I just think that we forget like how genuinely good he was in the NBA and throughout his basketball life. So that's it. In terms of like all-time greats underrated, I think that Dirk does not get a ton of credit outside of Dallas, outside of this region, for being one of the best to ever play the game of basketball and also changing the game as well. And also, impacting the history of the game, the play style of the game, everything. So I'll say Dirk as well for most underrated for that question. These are some great questions today. We're going to also have some more mailbags. So Mailbag Monday will continue because it's a lot of fun to do, making sure that we didn't miss anything. At Medlin John, your question was about the lineup with Chet, Victor, etc. Go listen to the mailbag. Go listen to the prospect profile on Victor that we have on the pod last week, where you can go hear all my thoughts on Victor. At Moneyman Cooper, should the Thunder sign Cam Johnson or Russell Westbrook? I do not think that they should sign Russell Westbrook, but Cam Johnson is a very good fit for OKC. If they were able to get that player, he'd be a significant upgrade to this roster. So I'd love them to go get Cam Johnson. But again, we're supposed to poo-poo the parade of like the Thunder, patience. So the Thunder are going to be patient. But if you're going to just hypothetically talk about what players might make a huge impact, Cam Johnson would be a really good upgrade for OKC. Let me know in the comments, who are your GOATs? Let me know that below. And until tomorrow, be good and be good to one another.